is a Fabrengen. Instead of taking something from the Sichos, this is from Sichos Kodesh. This is a Fabrengen of the Rebbe from Tafshin Nun 1990. And the Rebbe connects beautifully the Haftarah of this week's Parsha with the beginning of the Parsha. And the whole Sikha is focused on the idea of how precious every Jew is. And that is something that the Rebbe first expresses in the language of the Haftarah. And then he connects us also to Vayikra, that in the beginning of our Parsha, we also see this idea of how precious the every Yid is, and how only a person needs to only speak positively about every Yid. Certain parts of the Sikha where the Rebbe goes also into against those that speak negatively, but I think we're not going to have enough time to get through everything, so I think I might skip that part. I'll only focus on the positive. Okay. Haftarah Shabbazu Pesachas Ba'achrozes HaKadosh Baruch Hu Am Yisrael Am Zu Yצרתי Li. This nation I have formed for me. Tihlosi Saperu. They will relate my praise or my praises. Achrozes Mevatas Samayla Klolos Vasgulam Yuchedes Shel Am Yisrael Kol Echad VeEchad MiYisrael Anoshim Noshim V'Taf B'Chol Azmanim B'Chol M'Koymes. This is expressing the specialness of every Yid, every single Jew, man, woman, child, all times and all places. Why? Shezeu Amish al Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's Hashem's nation. Amze Yצרתי HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'atzmi, Yצרתי li, it's for myself. Tihlosi Saperu. B'milim sfuris elum misaper ha'novi asa yechudiyus shel Am Yisrael ha'chavivus ha'nifla shel b'nei Yisrael it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How special the Yidden are by Hashem. The Navi Yeshaya, this is from Yeshaya Navi the Haftarah. Kimavor Baruch Hu Apratis B'Torish B'Ksav B'Torish B'Alpeh U'Kvish Yisbar L'Kamon. This specialness is explained in different places, but the Rebbe is going to explain the Sikha more so and analyze the words of this Posuk to be able to show how special Yidden are by Hashem, regardless of what they do or they don't do. And that itself, the Rebbe is going to say, is what will motivate them and cause them to eventually do the right thing, regardless of where they are now. The Posuk zeh yesh lem pashtas shnei inyanim shoynim. Aleph b'negel lemuhusa shel am zu Yçרתי li shem am kroivay am shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The first point of the Posuk is, this is my nation. That's it. We're not talking about anything that they earned, anything they did, anything they accomplished. It's a natural state of a Yid that's a nation of Hashem, that Hashem formed it, they formed them for Him. And Beis, B'negeya lavidosam Tihlosi Saperu, B'Lashon Haradak, Am Zu Yçרתי li, Liyos li la'am, V'heim Yisapru Tihlosi al Anisim she'es olam cholu, that they will relate my praises. So there's what they are, and then following that, there is what they do. Actually, later in the Sikha, we're going to see something very interesting, that they don't even have to do anything to relate Hashem's praises. Their very existence, that very existence of every Yid and of Klal Yisrael, that itself relates Hashem's praises. Okay, moving on, Medibra Mechiltam, Shalom Medicine Posuk Zeh Am Zu Yçרתי li, She'ein Lecha Am El Yisrael. The Mechilta says, when Posuk says Am Zu Yçרתי, what's the message? What's he trying to say? Hashem is trying to say through the Navi Yeshaya, who is my nation? Who is my people? My chevra? Yidden. Yes, there's a lot of nations in the world and they all play a role, but Yidden are considered my nation. The first half of the Posuk is independent of the second part that speaks about what they accomplish, what they praises they say, but rather their very nature of connection with Hashem. Nishelas Hashai lemau atoichen the Am Zu Yçרתי li kishel atzmai mebli Tihlosi Saperu lavetz Hashem k'mayim Chazal ani nivreis l'sham sheskoymi. Since the entire reason why a Yid was created was to serve his Maker, so if so, what benefit and what specialness is in there in the Jew before he actually serves, by just being and existing. And inyan noisef hadorish bir tilosi saperu kosav b'loshem vaday v'lechure mekivin shezatoli ba'avodas ha'adam loy ba'am kamzu yitzarti li ketzid yichol loy marzel loshem vaday. When it says they will relate my praises, he's making a statement. He could say when or if, and so on. He doesn't say it. He doesn't qualify it. He says, Amzu Yatzartali Tilosi Saperu, as if it's a given. It's a far-gone conclusion. Amzu Yatzartali, that I know. That is a nation that Hashem created. But Tilosi Saperu, that's up to me, if I'm going to tell over Hashem's praises. So he says, Afal Pisha Efshel Farish is a Mevi Acharkal Tilosi Saperu. Hashleimus b'zeh, or Yiseidim b'zeh, Titzam b'zeh, Boifim Vade Tilosi Saperu. We could explain that it brings to the other, but it still doesn't fit in that much in the Posuk. The next two paragraphs, he goes into a lot of details about the Posuk, and we'll get straight to the answers about why he uses the word am and why it says zu and why it says yotzarti. Every single word of the Posuk that Rebbe is going to explain later on. Let's skip over. And then another thing that Rebbe says, let's skip over to Beis on the other side of the page. The Rebbe says, whenever we have Haftarah, it has to be connected to the parsha. Since there's the parshas Vayikra over here, what's the connection between this Haftarah, Amzu Yatzarti Tilosi Saperu, with the parshas Vayikra? So, second paragraph on the second page. Abir b'chol zeh, yuvan al pi hagdom hanal, she'amzu yatzarti li b'chlal mevates hayichudiyas shel am Yisrael ha'kadosh baruch hu yotzar am ze la'atzmai. Zeu ha'am shaloi. Ki mevur b'protis bekam mekaymes b'tereseinu ha'kdoisham, v'chol teva b'posuk zeh mevatas nekuda noisefes b'zeh. First of all, this amzu yatzarti, that is expressing this idea of Hashem creating this nation for him. And like I mentioned just before, every single word is bringing out the specialness and uniqueness of Klal Yisrael. That's the foundation. The first word in the Posuk is we're called an Am. There are many words that the Torah could have used on the relationship of the Yidden and Hashem. He calls them a people, because our first and basic relationship between Hashem is that we are His people and He is our King. B'yitzias Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, Niu b'nei Yisrael, Amoy shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'nei Yisrael, Kiblu al Atzmam b's HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'melech, v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu lokach oisam loy lo'am, v'ad kedis v'mechilta anal, ein lecha am elo Yisrael, k'mei shekosav am zu yatzarti li. So this is a basic foundation of the relationship of Hashem and the Yidden of Hashem. It's like the relationship of a people and a king. Truth is, in our modern world, where we never experienced a true king and a true nation that's connected with a king, so we don't really appreciate the depth of what the Rebbe is saying over here. But in Torah and the king, according to Yiddishkeit, the king and the nation are intricately bound up, and each one completes and fulfills the other. The nation, as we're soon going to mention, is not a nation without a king, and the king is not a king without a nation. Shebezeh gufam zeh shebnei Yisrael hinam amish HaKadosh Baruch Hu mizbata hakiruv hagadol v'hakaruv b'yoyser b'neim hakesher ha'atzmi shenoitzer ben am v'melech ha'am hu am davke b'shah sheyesh lo melech, like I just now mentioned. When is a nation called a nation? Without a king, they're just a ragtag band of people that have some type of social interest between each other. It's not just that the greatness of the king is dependent upon the nation. If he doesn't have a nation, or if he has a smaller people, or if he has a smaller location and the geography, he's a lesser king. If he rules over more nations and more people, so then he's a greater king. It's not only that. The people make him a king. If he has no people, he cannot be a king. תלוי בזה שיש לי עם, שזה כל חלקי העם, כל הסוגים בני ישראל, וכל היחידים, ביוסם כולם חלק מעם אחד. This includes every single individual Yid, not just the general Klal Yisrael. We don't get swallowed up in the big picture. Every single Jew contributes to Hashem being a king. So he said, Merish oid koidem hatzivuyim shal hamelech al ha'am tzarech liyis l'chol l'roish hakesher b'neim betur melech v'am. V'az mitoysev k'teisah mezeh sh'hamelech mitzava al ha'am keitzad aleim lisnaig v'ha'am noyakach. ובלושן המדרש קבלו מלכוסי ואחר כך אגזר לכם גזירס לפני שישנה קבלו מלכוסי אין עם שעליו יחולו הגזירס. עם זו יצרתי has to come before תהלתי יספרו. Before the nation can do anything, before the Jewish people do anything, first there has to be that we become his people. And that was created when we went out of Mitzrayim, when we received the Torah. That was the first step. We became Hashem's people. Once we became his people, then there is a relationship that's possible to say that Hashem tells us what to do. But if we're not a people, we're not connected with him, so then there's no connection that's possible through mitzvahs. Posuk omer she'inyan shebnei Yisrael hinam am shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu nifal aidei HaKadosh Baruch Hu amzu ytzarti li. So now he's going to skip the word zu. He'll get back to the meaning of the word zu, but he's going to focus on the word ytzarti li. That the fact that a Yid has this essential bond with Hashem is because Hashem did it. Hashem formed it. It says, Mamlechas Koyanim v'Goy Kodesh, and so on. Hu yotzar oisam b'toich am shaloi. He formed the Yid as a nation. And we'll soon explain the significance of that. V'lechein muvan shebezel le'shayach shum shinui elo li. Kol makom shenemer li ein ezaz la'olam. La'achri matan Torah kishahoya hakablu malchusi ayde kol b'nei Yisrael atzoiv kol adoyres echad shenoil Yehudi ein nizgar k'halacha areu chelik me'am Yisrael chelik me'am zu yatzarti li. U'betur shkazeh areu poil sh'HaKadosh Baruch Hu nasa melech de melech v'loi am. This connection is in the way of li. The Chazal say wherever it says the word li, it's always, it doesn't cease. Vayikra li truma. The Mishkan is always in existence. The Mishkan was never destroyed. The word of li is an everlasting connection. The connection of the Yidden with Hashem is everlasting as well. And therefore, it's more than just that Hashem chose them, but he formed them to be in this type of way. Yehudi chelik ma'am Yisrael amzu yatzarti li. Ein shum tnoim ve'ein zet toli ba'ofen hanagose b'dargas avedose b'kima Torah mitzvahs k'mayim rechazal af b'shachati Yisraelu. It makes no difference what the Yid does. His bond with Hashem is because Hashem wanted to have the bond. So regardless if I act upon it, regardless if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, it's still, the bond is still there. Imunol Yehuda Eshnesgar Kalocha Reuchelik Me'amzu Yatzartili Va'adraba. Zeh maybe legs are lechem Gseirusay Sheikhos Torah mitzvahs. Some people think that Torah mitzvahs is what makes the person a Yid. And if they didn't grow up in a Lubavitch environment, they might say, he doesn't do anything. He's a goy. It's the opposite way around. It's because we are a Yid, because we have this essential bond with Hashem. That's why we need to express that bond through Torah mitzvahs. It's not the Torah mitzvahs that create the bond. The bond is a bond of the essence. And we manifest it, we express it through doing Hashem's mitzvahs. This is the highest thing possible, this bond with Hashem. The inyan sheni, a second thing, hamayla de b'nei Yisrael b'yoysam amish al kosh baruch hu she'yatzarteli. Sha'idei am zeh nifal, top of the next page, HaKadosh Baruch Hu melech. Melech Yisrael, val yodam melech al kol ha'olam. We make Hashem king. And through that, by extension, on the whole world. That's why it says, we say in the bracha, Baruch Ato Hashem, Elokeinu melech ha'olam. through him being Elokeinu, our God. So then, by extension, from being our gods, then becomes Melech HaOlam. Yצרתי לי. The simple meaning of li means ba'avuri, for my sake. I made them for my sake. Noisef al pirish beli lavid oisik it'll come on. Another explanation of li. The Rebbe in the meantime already hinted at 3 different ideas in li. Li means that it's everlasting, unchanging. Li means for my sake, as we'll soon explain. And li, we're going to say later on, means literally to serve me. I created them. Why? So they should do the Torah mitzvahs. Just by their existence, they becomes a king. So that's the second meaning in the word li. Li is coming to tell you, it's for my sake. How am I going to be a king if I don't have a nation? I got to make the Yidden a people. I made him a people. Now, for my sake, I become now a king. Gimel. ידוע שאף על פי שהמלך הוא שלוי בערך העם, הרי העם צריך להיות בדומה אל המלך, שעל שייך שהוא ימלך עליהם, על דרך עם ומלך בשר ודם, העם צריך להיות ממין המדבר בדומה למלך, לא שייך שהמדבר יהיה מלך, אלא על מין המדבר. As far as lofty a king is over his nation, there still has to be a certain commonality between them. A king can only be a king over human beings. He can have millions of animals. A human being is not going to be a king over animals. He can control them. Doesn't make a difference. It's not considered a king. A king is only when you have people to be a king over. So on the one hand, people shows that there's a people between a king is a great distance, a great gap. On the other hand, there's a certain similarity. The Rebbe is going to say over here a beautiful concept. Perhaps all of this specialness of the Yid is only from the Neshama's perspective. Why? Because what part of me is like Hashem? My Neshama. Especially those who learn Tanya, Chassidus, Chelik El Kabam Al Mamish, it's a part of Hashem above. There's a similarity. But the body doesn't have anything. Therefore, only when I do mitzvahs am I bringing the neshama out into revealed way, and because I'm bringing the neshama out to revealed way, so then we could see that commonality that we have with Hashem. But if chas v'shalom a person doesn't do the mitzvahs, so the neshama is concealed, so I don't even appreciate how it's amzu yצרתי, this connection between a Yid and Hashem. So the Rebbe is going to say no. The connection between Yidden and Hashem, the similarity, the bond, is not limited to the neshama. It's also from the body's perspective. Which was also another question that we skipped over at the beginning, that he asked, why does he use specifically the word Yצרתי? He could have used other expressions. Like we said before, that the neshama is a part of Hashem. The external manifestation of a Yid is also similar to the king. Yצרתי לי, הקדוש ברוך הוא יצר, יצרתי es hatzura, של העם באופן שישים לעם של הקדוש ברוך הוא לי. In Chassidus, it explains the difference between creation, barasi, bria, like we say every morning in brachas, ata barasa, ata yitzarta, ata nafachta. Barasa is the very item itself. The thing was created, but it's not about, it could be formless also. When Hashem first, Bereshis bara Elokim es Shemaim es haaretz, the world had no form. It was a whole mishmash. Then, over the days of creation, it was started to take form. So what's the difference between Bria versus Yetzira? Bria does not yet manifest anything external. Yetzira is the external form that it takes. When we talk about Hashem's relationship with the Jewish people, it's not just that internal level of connection that comes because of the neshama. It's with the externalities of a Yid, with his formation, that's something that Hashem made. That it says Gam tzir ha-koiches v'tchunas shel Yehudi shebezah yisrael l'chura hava min aloymer shezatoli ba'adam b'ispatchus kechoisav chulu hareyu b'tzir aleki b'yoisam amaleki. The person's character traits, the person's soul powers, all of these reflect Hashem, despite the fact one could say that it's something of my own making. L'dugma shloisha simonim yesh b'umazur achmanim b'shonim v'goyim l'chsadim, the very well-known Maimer Chazal, that what are the three indicators of a Yid? They are merciful, bashful, and they do acts of kindness. So these are all because they descend from Hashem. They have this connection and commonality with Hashem. So again, it's not the core of the neshama, it's the external formation of the neshama, the external characteristics of the neshama that's connected with Hashem. Every part of the person, not just his soul powers, even what his spiritual garments of thought, speech, and deed, and even his physical face, Kabbalah explains, is connected and reflects the four letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's how much Hashem's forming of the Yid is connected with him. Okay, moving on, myself, Betanya, Allah Shnakosov, Shen Shamareu Chelkel Kamemal. But the Alter Rebbe in Perik Beis and Tanya, he often uses psukim to make a point, but then he will bring a further nuance to that posuk, to that quote, to that Maimer Chazal. In this case, there's a posuk. It says in Iyuv that the person is a chelek elakam mimal, a part of Hashem of above. The Alter Rebbe adds one word, mamash. What's the emphasis with that? It's the simple meaning, what the Alter Rebbe is adding with the word mamish, is that sometimes we look at certain expressions and we say it's what's called in English hyperbole. It's exaggeration. Even in the Torah, there's things that are used in a metaphor. It says Hashem's outstretched arm, he took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. Obviously, Hashem doesn't have a physical arm. So one might interpret that the words Chelek El Kamemal is also, doesn't literally mean it. It's an exaggerated concept. Comes Alter Rebbe and says, don't learn that pasuk that way. Chelek El Kamemal Mamish, it literally means that way. That is one explanation what the Alter Rebbe wants to say by adding the word mamish. But also, a deeper idea, yesh l'kach pirush noisav shechelkel kamemal hareu mislabish beguf hagashmi beoifen shel mamash. What does that mean? Mamash is related to something that's substantial, something that's tangible. The neshama doesn't remain removed, it becomes tangible in a way through the body. Ad she'efshel l'masha im chush hamishush. V'yesh lefarish b'zeh sh'hamamoshes shel haguf chai shel Yehudi sh'shayich l'masha shel v'mamoshes v'shel kol kochoisav mekabelas achayis mechelek al mal v'chol tnuas gufay. Tnuas etzbois hayad v'chiyotz v'zeh afilu be'inim shel reshus v'choil harei ze gilu achayis shel nafsh elikis. The Rebbe says an amazing thing. Every physical movement of a person's neshama, of a person's body, even when he's preoccupied with mundane matters, not holy matters, it's really expressing the vitality and the life force of the neshama. You say to Mizu, I feel like Yehud Shana Gosileis Ata Ein Al Pitziv Hashem Terosoi Nois of Al Kach Shaf Bishachati Yisrael Hu Avolzeu Etzloi Behelim, top of page 483. Harigam b'matzav zeh retzoyne amiti ulakayim es retzoyne shal Kodesh Baruch Hu adekiyum haTorah v'mitzvos. The Rebbe brings out perhaps all of this, the quality and the advantage of Amzu Ytzarti, that even the external part of the person is manifesting Hashem, is only when the Yid lives a life in accordance with Torah mitzvahs. Comes the Rebbe and says no. Even a Jew that is not yet there to actually express his life in a way of Torah mitzvahs, even then we're saying that his true will, what he really desires, is to fulfill Hashem's will. And the Rebbe always brings down this ruling of the Rambam. There's just some background. There is a halacha that one cannot give a divorce under duress, by coercion. A divorce that was a get in Jewish law that was given by coercion, or for that matter, a Jewish servant that was sent out, not a Jewish servant, a servant of a Jew that was sent out free under coercion, that is an invalid get. It's an invalid bill of divorce. There are certain situations where the Chachamim say that according to halacha, this man must divorce this woman, whatever the conditions are. So, and what happens if he doesn't want to do it? So it says that we have to force him until he says, I want to do it. But we just now said that a Yid cannot give a get under coercion. So the Rambam explains every Jew wants to do what it's Hashem's will. If you're just coercing him for your own interest, so then that's not his true will. But since the Chachamim explained what Hashem's true will is, and in certain situations where the Chachamim said that the true will of Hashem is that this divorce should take place, so by coercing the person, you are making him give voice to his true will inside. Let's see it inside, third line from the top. Posuk Rambam, Shakol Yehudi, every Yid, including someone that says the opposite. Every Jew wants to do all mitzvahs and wants to be far away from transgression. So why doesn't he do so? The person's evil inclination took hold of him, took power of him. That's why you coerce him until he says, I want. He's not being coerced, but actually his bad inclination is what coerced him to not want to do it. Once he was coerced, so then his Yetzirah became weakened, and now he's saying, I want, according to his own will. Gam Ritzoyne Hagoli Vakitzoyne Lakaim Ritzoyne Shalkosh Baruchu Vidibura Vanagois of Hafchim Hareu Mitzazesh Yitru Shatokfai Ki Ilu Shemishu Hechsik as Yada Mana Menal Masu Ritzoyne Aprati. The Rebbe gives an amazing example over here. The Rebbe says that a person that is not doing what Torah wants, since in truth every Yid deep down wants to do what Hashem wants him to do, so then it's as if I'm trying, let's say, to do a mitzvah, and someone's holding on to my arm and not letting me do it. That's the same case of a Yid that feels that his Yetzirah is pushing him not to do this particular mitzvah, and the Yetzirah is like holding on to his hand and saying, I'm not letting you go. So obviously, if he somehow manages to break free, that is the will of the person. The same thing when the Chachamim coerce the person, all they're doing is breaking the person free of his external things that are not letting him do the mitzvah. That we see throughout the generations that a Jew was willing to give up his life for Yiddishkeit, because deep down every Yid wants to be connected to Hashem. And just like it's that way when it comes to all Yidden throughout the generations being willing to give up their lives rather than bow down to idols, so the same thing is the same will within him for all mitzvahs. V'kachu gam haratzon shaloi b'negel kol ha'torah mitzvahs k'maimer chazal ein al d'bay rav ve'ed elam kinnichs b'y ruach shtus. Ruach shimachasa u'malima me'enov shal Yehudi as ha'uvda sheba'asiyas ha'avera afil ha'avera kala poil ha'davar nituk melakus. Amnam lu ha'yaroya zois asher masbirim loy gam hu ha'yamoisr al kachas nafshay. A yid that is willing to give up his life for not to convert to a different religion, but he's willing to do other transgressions. It's only because he doesn't realize that any transgression rips him away from Hashem. If he would realize that this also rips him away from Hashem, so just like he's willing to give up his life not to convert, the same thing he would be willing to give up his life not to do anything against Hashem's will. Al pi anal yuvan gam shenois lakach shamzu ytzarti limevates malosan shal Yisrael umachus shal Kodesh Baruch Hu mitzad etzem hakesher shbe Yisrael v'Kodesh Baruch Hu nitoisef oid inyan v'inyan ikri bazem mitzad ha'uvda she'amzu ytzarti li hakesher shbein am Yisrael al kol chalokov kol Yehudi ma'Kodesh Baruch Hu bo l'dei bitui begolui v'gam ba'atzura shel b'nei Yisrael b'kamei fan kanal v'ad la'rotzen shalom begoli l'kaim Torah mitzvahs al yitzri shel tokfoi. So here we see that every yid is formed in such a way that even their will is such that they want to do Hashem's will. Except there are things that get in the way, but that's not who I am. I am, and this goes on every yid, I'm someone that's connected to Hashem because Amzu Yatzartili, even my externals were formed by Hashem. So once we've established that, so now we can understand the second half of the Posuk. Tihilasi Yisaperu. So he says, Al Pizeh Dalit, Yesh Loimer Ahemshach Shal Tihilasi Yisaperu Loshem Vade Lamzu Yatzarti. We asked before, how are you so sure? How can you claim that they will relate my praises? Why am I so sure? Amzu Yatzarti, that's a fact. But Tihilasi Yisaperu, that's up to me. It says, Kshem Shayichudi Shalom Yisrael Hareu Begilim Mitzadatzmi Mitzada Yitzira Melmaila Yatzarti Li Gam Betzira Koiches Ad Letzira Gashim Shalahem Leloi Kol Shayches Mavodas Adam. It doesn't make a difference what I do. Hashem's form is imprinted upon me. K'moikein Harezim Mizbate Gam Betilasi Saperu She'etzem Ametzias Vatzir Shalom Yisrael Kozeh She'poil Tilasi Saperu Al derech hapirish b'shamayim mesaprim kvoid kel sheshamayim atzma mareim mesaprim kvoid kel. That it relates, it reveals. Eina kavona shayehudi tzarich lasis haysafesh al sipur b'tilos Hashem ela etzem yitzirasei payela zoism tzadatzmei. This is what I mentioned right away at the beginning. The very existence of a Jewish person, that itself already relates to praises of Hashem, regardless of what I'm doing. Yesh loimer she'inyan shel tilasi yisaperu she'nifl mitzad etzem atzura shel Yehudi yatzarti li mizbate gam bekiyum hanitzchi shel am Yehudi. The fact that a Jewish person, that the Jewish nation is everlasting, and they've survived all of those that tried to destroy us, that is an ongoing praise to Hashem. Bli abeit al kach she'atam amatim kol ha'amim kif sa'achas ben shivim zeivim. V'charav kol ha'gzeiros v'redifus v'meshach ha'doros ha'chmal slan ha'am nishar shalom ki em nitzchi ba'ofen ha'gol le'ine basar ba b'shah shekama v'kama mum s'ayil ha'chi gedoylem nichdu mikvar sheze mevate begoli le'ene ha'koil s'koicha shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu tilasi saperu shehichnis ba'amzu yatzarti li she'en azaz lo'olam, like we said before. So that is the greatest praise for Hashem. Give a look at this everlasting nature that comes from Hashem in them. Inyan zeh, about the everlasting nature of the Jewish people, is even more so now. Muchach begol yoyser tzvnei Yisrael shebedareinu hayorshim v'anitsigim shel hadoira achren dor she'avra sachurban ha'oyim. The Rebbe gives an amazing expression over here. He says, our generation are both the inheritors and the representatives of the generation that survived the Holocaust. We are supposed to give expression to that generation. We are supposed to represent and exemplify the miracles of that generation. In addition to those that survived, that are here alive from then. Those that survived and they established a whole new shalshelis, a whole new chain of children and so on, that will live on forever and ever. Asher kol Yehudi she'avar as a churban v'nishar b'chaim mebli habeit al mamodim atzavi aproti areu nes chayim mukshi al lebedik nes shal Kadosh Baruch Hu Hashem revates tilosi shal Kadosh Baruch Hu tilosi saperu. Anyone that survived the Holocaust, the very fact that he's alive, that's an open miracle of Hashem. He's a walking and living miracle, and therefore his very existence is praising Hashem. And the this idea that Hashem connected with us in such a type of way causes and pushes us that we should actually manifest Hashem praises. We should actually do it and act in such a way that's praiseworthy to Hashem. Then the next ois, he says the whole idea of a nation, that the nation is on the one hand making up the king, like we said before, and then there's another idea of a nation showing that they are still independent. Then he's going to say about the idea of Amzu. Let's skip over to the second column, last paragraph, on the second column on 484. Amzu, Loshen Zu, which is also the feminine of Zeh, which means this. Moire she'efsher lahares al Zeh mara betzvoi v'omer Zeh. Zeh moire she'zeh b'shavnei Yisrael im am shal Kodesh Baruch HaReze b'chol dor v'dor b'chol mokum loidak b'yitzias Mitzrayim u'beis matan Torah kasher niyesel la'oma b'zman she'beis Mitzrayim kaim k'yotz b'zeh. The words Amzu, it doesn't, if it wouldn't say the word Amzu, it would say Am Ytzarti. So we could say, you know what the Hashem was talking about? He was talking about in the time of when they went out of Mitzrayim. He was talking about when they received the Torah. The word Amzu that's written in the everlasting Torah means every single generation. We can point with our fingers. Zu means something that you can point with your finger and say, this nation that's here now is the one that relates my praises, is the one that I formed, is the one that I'm connected to. Nois al kach shekolim batoyro nitzchi koyro nitzchi chaladoyro is hareze mudgish yoser begoli kashakosav amzu ubedivrei HaKadosh Baruch Hu sha'am hazeh she'efshel laharis olav be'etzba, top of 485. Ha'am shel b'nei Yisrael shbachol dor v'dor yotzarti li v'tilosi saperum. And another point that Rebbe brings out is that amzu means also, we're not talking about neshamas in Gan Eden. We're talking about neshamas down here in the physical world. Amzu koyala am Yisrael shenimtza b'hoiva b'neshamas begufim b'el mahazah gashim b'yem hazeh lo ya neshamas b'Gan Eden or neshamas begufim kfi shiyu b'el mabal lachar zman lachar tchias hamesim ela davke Yehudim elu shenimtzoim b'zman hazeh neshamas begufim lamata heim amzu shalei memar HaKadosh Baruch Hu yitzarti li. We're talking about people here in this world. We're one long chain from the time of the forefathers. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Vayimos, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Hari amzu b'dereinu zev ki yotz b'zeh hu asoiger shel shalshela shemachaber yachad es kol hadoros shel lefanav la'achrav. It is what joins and closes the link and ensures that the link keeps on going, that the chain keeps on going. We are representative both of our past and of future generations. V'aleim namar Yetzarti li. Gam tzurosam hishalam meleki. Even their external, their form. V'lechein harei zeba ba'ofen de li. Noisef al kach shebnei Yisrael hinam amish al kodesh baruch hu sheshayach loy li. Harei yitziras am Yisrael ba'ofen kazeh sheyesh b'hem sakoyach laved HaKadosh Baruch Hu li b'shvili. Hashem empowered us and embedded within us the power to actually, this is the third meaning of the word li, that we are able to do our work for His sake. We are able to serve Him. Because of the way Hashem formed us, we have this capability. Bishvili ani nivreis l'sham sheskoini v'gam legals b'chol ha'olam echshu loy nivra l'chvoidai. A Yid can also reveal that in the world, that was the purpose of the creation of the world. Ukemedubar la'el shaydeze shiyatzarti yesh liyehudi b'toich atzmai b'sverose hagluya rotzen l'toyra mitzvahs hadoichef oisai legalis rotzen z'abapoil v'azai nasa tilosi saperu yisaperu davke. Not some other expression of relating something. Ba'ofen shel sipur begalui. It's something that's being told over in a revealed way. V'gami saperum losh nevin sapir. It's like a sapphire stone that shines. Lahoyer adi etzem mitziyusi v'tzurosei. Aidea v'dosu v'poil canal. So the Rebbe is combining all the different factors. Both the very existence of a Yid relates Hashem's praises, but that very existence of a Yid pushes and causes that he will actually do actions that are reflecting that, and in his actions and his service, he is relating Hashem's praises as well. And now the Rebbe is going to connect it with the parsha of the week. Now moving Gama Kesher da Scholas Haftarah Amzu Yetzarti li Tilosi Saperu im Scholas Parsha Vayikra al Moshe Gomer Daber bnei Yisrael Gomer Adam ki Yakov mekem Korban LaHashem min Gomer. Gam bezer roim es Gimel and Yorma now. Also over here we see these three aspects. Vayikra Lashon Chiba. We have right away the Rashi at the beginning of Chumash Vayikra. It says that the fact that it says that he called to Moshe, calling indicates that he doesn't just appear out of the blue. He's entering into a discussion based on friendship and love. Moira lachiba atzmis HaKadosh Baruch Hu lebnei Yisrael shalom ma'ila mekol hagiluyim v'lachein lekosem b'zeh shem kolshu. Chassidus speaks about this. It doesn't say Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. Later it says Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe, but it just says Vayikra. He called. Who did the calling? Because this is something that comes from Hashem's very essence. You can't even describe it by a name. Vayikra Yud Kei Vav Kei to Moshe. Mekivin shezol amayla m'shemes miu hakoyre mekivin shezol amayla m'shemes v'giloyim abam ul maylam. Al derech hakesher the amzu im li, and from that, what did Hashem command? Hatzivi al Korbonos. Vaydaber avay love Adam ki Yakov mekem Korban goymer namar davke lebnei Yisrael. Mekivin shehem nekroim Adam al shem Adam al elyon dvukel l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu. It chooses to use not the word ish, not some other description. It calls it Adam. Adam is the highest description. Adam is in the word Ed Malel, and I'm likened to above. Al derech Yetzarti li sha'atzura de bnei Yisrael hi mitzad Yetziras HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'hi bedugma mol mayla ula'achrei zeh harezeh mizbate ba'avodas HaKorbonos v'poil. This is followed by the actual thing that he speaks about throughout the parsha, throughout this chumash, about actually offering sacrifices. Al derech tilosi saper all the ways for Adam. Sheba k'tetzam Vayikra v'atziv al Korbonos noisav al tilosi saperu shenifa de etzim kim am Yisrael. So here the Rebbe says, okay, what does this mean for us? And here the Rebbe is going to speak in powerful, emphatic words about how we need to look at every Jew, and how we have to welcome every Jew, and how we have to see Hashem reflected in every Jew. Mikol Amar Le'il Yaitzel Apoil B'Negel Ayachash Tzarech Lias Klapi Kol Yehudi Nafkamina Kfula. Reishis Tapa 486. Begoidel Shivchon Malosum Shal Am Yisrael Shal Kol Yehudi Am Noshim Noshim V'Tafim Bli Abeit Am Amodim Atzavei Areu Yehudi. Chelik Me'am Shal Vaymer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amzu Yetzarti Li Tilosi Saperu. Every single Jew, man, woman, or child, is part of this nation, and there's nothing greater than that. ועד כדי כך הוא גודל השבח והמעל בני ישראל שנויס ועל מעל עצמם זו יצרתי פועל עם זה שהקדוש ברוך הוא נעשה מלך. This is an amazing thing. This nation, just by their existence, makes Hashem a king. What could be greater than that? ומזה יוצא הנפקא מינה. So this means now a very practical application of this in our lives. כי שפויקשים ביהודי שמאיזה סיבה שתהיה עדיין אין הנגוסה בשמירת התורה ומצוות בשלימוס צורך ליאס היחס אליו שהוא חלק מעם זו יצרתי לי ללא יתלויס בהנגוסה ופועל. If a person meets a Jew that at the moment he does not act in accordance with Torah and mitzvahs, how do I need to look at that person? I need to realize he is part of that nation that Hashem formed, regardless of what he's actually doing that now or not doing. When you look at that Jew, you see here reflects the everlasting nature of the Jewish people, which praises Hashem. So you see a Jew walking down the street that seemingly is not acting at all in Torah mitzvahs, but he's a living, breathing testimony to Hashem's miracles. Literally. How could this Jew have been a Jew after 3,000 years of persecution? How's it possible? The very existence of the Jew, regardless of what he's doing, is already a testimony for Hashem. I don't remember if I saw this from the Rebbe or I saw this somewhere else. In a similar vein, it's a chiddush when you do find, after all this time, that so many Yidden do follow Torah mitzvahs. How can you come with tightness? How can you come with complaints to a Jew after 3,000 years and so many years without a Beis Hamikdash and so many years without prophets? How can you... The surprise is not, why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing that? No, the shock is that there's some people that still do stuff. So, because we got to look at every single Jew in that type of way, that really his very existence is a praise of Hashem. And therefore, al-achas kama v'kama, this is, if it would have been true in any generation, but especially in our generation. כשמדובר בנגיע לבני ישראל שבדרנו זה, שנויס ועל-כך שחלק מהם הם כדאי כשנשבו לבין העכו"ם ומילא אינם השם כלל ומעמד מצבם בידus. The Jews of this generation, first of all, they're not at all guilty of doing anything wrong because they didn't grow up in a Jewish environment. They're not liable for any of their actions because they didn't know any better. Vayikra b'yosim yoshim netzigim shal doir over satzar sachmon letzlan b'doir ha'achron loy talking about my tzara they moifsim chaim lebedikim moifsim asaprim tilosh hakadosh baruch hu los yisperu kanal. And in addition, like we said before, they are the inheritors, they are the representatives of that nation that suffered the terrible Holocaust. So again, they are living and breathing miracles that their very existence is something that attests Hashem's praises more than if you would have met a Jew in the street in the 1800s or in 1,000 years ago. Halimud mezel lepoyel wad kama tzrichim lishtadol olam tzchus ladaber b'shvachim sheYisrael. It's so crucial and vital what we need to speak about a Jew's praises. Mitach yediyas ma'ilosam anifla b'tor am kroivish al HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Noisav al kach v'gam ze ikir shai de adibur b'shevach shel am Yisrael ari ze gam shvachim shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shebachar v'yotzav davkes am Yisrael yatzarti li. The Rebbe adds another thing over here. When I speak well about another Jew, so I am by extension also speaking well about Hashem. This is the people that he chose. Can you imagine if you went ahead and you chose something, you decided, I want to buy a Cybertruck that I find is the ugliest vehicle on the road. Every single day I see one on the road that gets more and more ugly in my eyes. Can you imagine if you went to a guy that bought a Cybertruck, you say, that's an ugly thing. How long do you think your friendship would last? The guy made a choice. He could have bought something else. And he decided to buy a Cybertruck, and now you're insulting his choices? Hashem goes ahead and chooses this Jew. And you feel that this Jew may not be living up to the standards that you believe this Jew should be living up to. And you go ahead and you say, So you're telling Hashem, or you're speaking about Hashem, that Hashem's choices are not what you think are correct. That is the opposite of praising Hashem. Hanafkemin v'alimud hashenihu b'negel le'ishtadlos v'achrayis lo'oider oidihu d'melchanchem l'schazik b'chol ha'inyonim. The Rebbe is always very careful that when he is so inclusive and says every Jew is a Jew, regardless of what they are, it's not meant, chas v'sholom, to let anybody off the hook and say, I'm a Jew regardless, so why should I put on film? Why should I keep Shabbos? Why should I eat kosher? Why should I put... No, just the opposite. Because you're so beloved by Hashem, because you have this bond with Hashem, bring it out, express it, use it. Because she'eina b'shleimus b'shiras ha-mitzvahs hu chelik ma'amzu ytzarti li gam tzatzuros ha'golui koil shekayim etzlei b'shleimus ha-rotz l'kayim s'toir mitzvahs kanal v'zeh doiche foisoi liyos boifen tiklos yisaperu. He should also yikayim s'atoir ha-mitzvahs afal pi sheyitzroi tokvoi harei muvan ha-poshut shan hogi ima tzricha liyos la'oire roi legals b'yod yoyser ha-rotzen ritzoinoi. How? Not by speaking negatively about him, but encouraging him. Aidei hasbara, explaining to him. B'dvar ma'yetz ma'alev, speaking from the heart. U'b'darkei noyim b'darkei sholem. As achshivas vayakros the Torah mitzvah. She said, I love v'kesher l'shloim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Talk to the Jew. Mean what you say. Speak from your heart and express to him how this is for his sake, his bond with Hashem. And then he speaks about the opposite possibility, which we're not going to go into. Let's skip over to the next page, over on page 488. Second paragraph from the top. Let's skip over to the second column, second paragraph on the top. There's a special connection with the time in which we find ourselves. This Farbrengen was on Hey Nissen, the same date that we are now on the calendar. The days that we're preparing for our Yom Tov of freedom, the Yom Tov of Pesach. Chag Pesach, like we mentioned before, is the date of the Jewish people's birth. It's their collective national birthday. Oz nasa ha'amzu yatzarti li. Umkiven shezahoy b'chodesh nisna re'azman ba'atzmoi nasan koyach b'bnei Yisrael v'roimam oisam li la'kadosh baruch hu. Ki yedua divra ha'gmara sheteva sheyesh b'beis ninim nidam nisan moiral nisim roimam b'nei Yisrael b'oifen da'arim nisi alaharim ka'am shal kadosh baruch hu. The word nisan is related to the word miracle. And when you have two nuns, it means miracles of miracles. The Hebrew word for miracle also means a flag that you raise high. So that indicates the time of Nisan, the time of miracles, raises the Jewish people high. When Hashem made us his nation, Amzu Yatzarti Li, that raised us up to be close to Hashem. And then, this was said in 1990, where the Rosh Tevis should be a year of miracles. What we spoke about earlier about the great favor that the Yidden have by Hashem. Now we have to again inspire and make sure that everybody gives money for people to be able to have their Pesach needs, both from matzah and all the needs of Yom Tov. Yiratzon should be the will of Hashem, should take from a yad mamish yiskayim b'nissen nigelum nissen asin le'go chol b'nei Yisrael shleimas ha'am b'noreinu v'skeneinu gar v'neinu v'neinu k'am echad heilchem l'Eretz Yisrael b'shleimas ha'aretz Eretz HaKodesh b'yachadim shleimas ha'Torah achas kshurim ha'Hashem echad b'gula mitzvah shleima take from yad mamish amen kein Yiratzon. We should all go to Eretz Yisrael with the complete Klal Yisrael, with our sons and daughters, as one nation connected with one God.